Cayden Boozer is the second highest rated high school player in the country, and yet Illinois is focusing on his twin brother. And I'm here to tell you why that actually makes sense.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. Simple reminder, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I got wonderful feedback on the weekend edition of Locked On Illini, so thank you so much if you watched or left a comment on that video. Your response was overwhelming, and it's something I'm going to consider doing in the future as well, especially when there's some Illini news to share. My name is Sunny Verma. You can also find me at IlliniCast if you're looking to have a chat on social media. Today's going to be a fun episode. We're going to be talking about the Boozer twins, and then also we get to kickstart our Big Ten preview series, as we're going to start with Ohio State and just talk about what the team's going to look like in football this upcoming season. And football is right around the corner. Big Ten Media Week is this week. And so it's about time to start getting to know some of our conference mates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. First and foremost, I want to wish a congratulations to the Boozer twins. They got a three-peat at Peach Jam over the weekend with a 71-62 win over AJ DeBonsa, the number one player in the country. Cayden Boozer, the number 2 overall player, had 19 and 10. Illinois' main focus, Cayden Boozer, had 8 points, 7 assists, and 7 rebounds. Now, wanting to recruit the Boozer twins is not a unique angle or strategy. In fact, all the top programs in the country are doing it. And again, why not? You're talking about 2 of the top 20 prospects in the entire 2025 class. But Illinois and Brad Underwood, they're actually going to focus on Cayden Boozer, the smaller guard who was actually ranked number 19. As I thought about it over the weekend, things started making sense to me, and now I'm at the point where I actually agree with the strategy. First and foremost, I just want to get out of the way. I don't expect either of the Boozer twins in Champaign 2 years from now. The staff jumped in on this recruitment a little late, and I do think, they'll probably go as a tandem to Duke or Florida or Miami or any of the other high-profile programs that are recruiting them. But Brad Underwood has always been a forward-thinking head coach, much more so than his peers. He, right on the onset of the transfer portal, was super aggressive to the point where other coaches are kind of catching up to his strategies. He's a guy, for all his faults, I do think when it comes to adjusting his game plan, he's more open and willing, and we've seen the success of it on the court. Today, recruiting seems to kind of be based on laying a foundation, planting the seeds. And I think that's just what they might be doing here with Cayden. Cayden is a fantastic player in his own right. He's got the size and skills to one day play professionally. So let's take a look at a couple different angles of how the Boozer twins' college careers could pan out. The first scenario is Cameron, who's dubbed as a one-and-done player, indeed ends up having a fantastic season, and he goes to the NBA draft and ends up as a top 5 pick. And hopefully, Cayden at that point also has a good season himself. And, I don't think he's a one and done player, but I do think he's a player, after maybe 2 or 3 years could jump to the league himself. That's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is Cameron, again, has a fantastic season, but maybe Cayden struggles a little bit. And sometimes the stress of that, seeing your brother succeed, despite loving your brother, seeing your brother succeed in a certain environment and then maybe you not living up to your expectations, that might put some extra undue pressure, especially when you're a teenager, you're young and impressionable. At that point, he may decide he wants to kind of carve out his own path, get a fresh start somewhere else, not be thought of as Cayden Boozer's brother. And that's where a team like Illinois jumps in. Brad Underwood, Orlando Antigua, what they're doing right now is they're laying the foundations of a relationship. Whether anything comes out of it, who knows? But these two guys, they're not dumb. You're talking about two of the best recruiters in the country. And I'll tell you another reason that they're not wasting their time. Orlando is familiar with the Boozer family. Again, he recruited both of them to Kentucky for an official visit. If Cameron and Cayden said that they absolutely 100% are only going to play together next season, Illinois wouldn't continue wasting their time. Because Cameron is not coming to Champaign. But the feedback the staff has gotten over the weekends is it looks like they're going to visit Champaign at some point for an official visit. So why wouldn't you at least follow that path through? Yeah, maybe it's a 1 in 10 chance that Cayden comes to campus, takes a look around, and the sell works. And he decides that, hey, maybe I'm actually more open to playing by myself than I originally planned on being. That's not likely. And I told you that that's not likely. But it can happen. The more likely scenario is that Brad continues to want to bring as much talent into Champaign as possible. Kylan Boswell is a former 5-star prospect himself. Decided to play in Arizona a couple seasons, and now he's back home in Champaign. Harry Booth is a 4-star player who's now in Champaign, another transfer. Brad and Orlando are going to do everything possible to keep as many doors open as they can. They can always pick and choose down the road. But a reason that they're such good recruiters is because of the relationships that they built. And this is merely one of the latest relationships that they're building. Are they wasting people's time? Are they getting Illinois fans excited for no reason? I don't think that's the case at all. If you watched friend of the program, Greg Waddle, Sleepers Media last week, kind of talked about whether Orlando and the staff was kind of wasting everyone's time, knowing that they weren't going to get some of these high 2025 prospects. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode of Locked On Illini. I have a lot to say about that, and I think it's something you guys are going to want to hear. But the gist of it is absolutely not. Brad and Orlando and Tim Anderson and Jeff Alexander are one of the best recruiting machines in the country. And now they've got the backing of NIL funds. And with the reputation of at least the top two guys, I am no longer at the point where if they both collectively decide on a certain angle, a certain strategy when it comes to recruiting, I'm not going to doubt them at all. Coming up next, we're going to preview Ohio State football. I'm going to do my best to get out a preview for you for all 18 teams before the season starts. I think the season's something like 40 days away, so I'm not sure I'll be able to get all 18 teams in. But I figure I might as well go ahead and start with one of the two best teams in the country, at least according to preseason rankings. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down and we get fewer games, the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, with football season right around the corner, we're going to go ahead and kick off the Big Ten preview coverage. And we're going to start off with Ohio State, who has the second best odds in the entire country to win the national championship. And in order to do that, I'm going to be bringing on JR from the Voice of College Football, Ohio State. JR, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here. Yep, love covering the Ohio State Buckeyes over at the Voice of College Football. Come check us out, YouTube, and if you want to find me on Twitter, JR's Rankings over there. A lot of Ohio State content there.
And JR will also be at Big Ten Media Days alongside me, so who knows, we might be shooting some content together. JR, I got a question for you. Ryan Day, 56 wins, 8 losses. Is Ryan Day in any sort of hot seat?
You know, it's interesting. I wrote up a rankings for the College Huddle, which is another group I'm a part of. I do some Big Ten coverage for them. And I did a write-up for their website, and it was coaches' hot seat rankings. And I ranked every single coach in the Big Ten on how hot the seat was. And Ryan Day was, in fact, number one. And my reasoning for that is not that he is the least accomplished coach. Actually, he's the most accomplished coach in the Big Ten right now. I guess you could argue Kirk Ferentz because he's been there longer, but he's not had the national success of winning a playoff game like Ryan Day has. But still, I put Ohio State
arguably in the conversation.
Well, yeah, again, he hasn't had the national, but yes, he has won the Big Ten. I think about as many times he won the Big Ten. Anyway, it's not important. But yeah, so Ryan Day is number one on my hot seat rankings, but I said at the end, I don't know if there's any coach in the Big Ten that's really actually on the hot seat this year. And it just kind of honestly just comes down to one game for Ohio State this year. And for Ryan Day, can Ryan Day, revive everything and beat the team up north? Can he get that monkey off his back? Ohio State fans are crazy. We own it. We know it. Now, do I think he's actually going to get fired if he loses to Michigan? No, his buyout's too big. I mean, we can talk about all that stuff, but trust me, every single fan, if he loses to Michigan again this year, every single fan will be clamoring, and even the ones who support him will be saying, I like Ryan Day, but man, he can't beat Michigan. That's just how it goes when you coach at Ohio State.
And it's been 3 straight games where he has not been able to beat Michigan. And now, obviously, with the team up north winning the national championship, I mean, things got crazy at Columbus. Put in a couple words, what happened with the Ohio State offseason?
Well, it all started off with as soon as they won that national championship, Quinshon Judkins announced that he was coming to Ohio State that night. So, I mean, that was huge. And really, it was kind of Quinshon Judkins saying he was coming that really sparked a lot of this stuff. Of course, Nick Saban retires a little bit later on, and then the Caleb Downs situation happens. Will Howard commits. I think he committed before. If it wasn't before, it was right after the national championship as well. But Ohio State fans, they knew that rumor and they knew he was coming most likely as well. So, I mean, you have all these things happen in the offseason. And then on top of that, you see player after player after player decide they are coming back. The pair of defensive ends that Ohio State fans are very excited about. The entire secondary is coming back except for Josh Proctor, who was like a 6-year senior. But Caleb Downs coming in, he's a sophomore and he's arguably better. I think most definitely better than Josh Proctor was. So, I mean, that's a whole lot of life there. I mean, just this entire offseason. And on top of that, you had Ryan Day basically admitting that him calling plays isn't working. Sunny, I don't know if you know this, but a head coach that calls plays, only one of them has ever won a playoff game before in college football. It's Ryan Day. He won one playoff game calling plays. All these other guys who call plays as head coaches, Lincoln Riley, Steve Sarkisian, all these other guys, they have never won a playoff game with their school where they are calling plays as the head coach. And so Ohio State fans were clamoring for that. The hire of Bill O'Brien was a little controversial. Then that goes away because he goes to Boston College. And now you have Chip Kelly, who, you ask the team up north fans and they say he's washed. They say that he's, not going to do anything anymore. I say the dude had a spectacular running attack at UCLA, so and he's going to have to do less with the CEO recruiting stuff now and can just coach ball. So give him a chance, see what he can do. And if you don't know the history behind it all, I mean, you can look it up. But Ryan Day, I mean, he knew Chip Kelly from a very young age. Chip Kelly is one of his mentors. in football and all that stuff. So very, very interesting situation there. And I think there's a lot to be excited about with Ohio State fans. But at the end of the day, you got to get results. That's what matters most.
And in order to get results, it seems in today's modern day college football, NIL is definitely involved. And Ryan Day has been pretty outspoken in the past about needing, certain levels of contributions in order to, produce on the field. And it seems to me like the fans really stepped up this offseason. Is that fair to say?
The fans stepped up, but another piece that's getting overlooked a little bit is what Ryan Day has been able to do with the monkey of calling plays off his back. He is no longer the pseudo offensive coordinator. He can truly be the head coach. We've heard a lot of rumblings this offseason about how Ohio State has tons of NIL money, but they're not necessarily just throwing it around like some other schools do. They are being very particular about where are we spending this NIL money and what area. Obviously, with Josh Proctor leaving at safety last year, Caleb Downs was a huge piece that was going to help, like I talked about him earlier on. And that was a big NIL opportunity that Ohio State had. And with Ohio State fans seeing, Michigan win the national championship, they didn't say, oh, let's put our heads down and Ohio State stinks and Ryan Day figures out. Nope, they opened up their pocketbooks and they said, we're donating because we can't live knowing that the team up north had the most recent national championship. So let's go take it 1 year after they do it.
So let's go ahead and get started talking about the team and the NIL that brought some of the talent in. You already mentioned Judkins. Let's talk a little bit about Will Howard, the former quarterback from Kansas State. Now, I'm assuming he's a starter, but obviously that quarterback room is actually pretty talented. You brought in another transfer named Sayan. Is Will Howard going to be starting day one?
I presume so. That seems to be the prevailing thought amongst most Ohio State fans. Now, like we've always said, Ohio State fans are crazy, so they're going to have their different thoughts out there. There are some people that want to see Devin Brown. If you don't know, there's a former coach for Ohio State that does a podcast now, and he was really clamoring for Devin Brown to be the quarterback last year over Kyle McCord. He even put it out there that he would be the quarterback, and there was no question, yada, yada. Well, I don't know if he said no question, but he was very, very confident that it was going to happen, and then it didn't happen. And so now he was kind of getting fans really excited for that possibility. Of course, if you know anything about last season for Ohio State, Devin Brown goes down with the injury during the Purdue game. He gets the start in the bowl game, and then he has the injury there as well. And so there's many Ohio State fans that really believe Devin Brown can do it. And on top of that, like you said, Julian Sayin coming in, the true freshman, he honestly probably has the best arm on the team. If you've listened to the insiders and some of the coaches speak in the press conferences and stuff like that, you really get the vibe that Julian Sayin has the best arm on the team. Now, is his processing level as high as maybe a Will Howard or Devin Brown? Not really, because he hasn't played college football yet,
Sure.
But he does process the game very quickly. He just, like I said, he doesn't have experience. He's a true freshman. I mean, this is what every freshman goes through. And then on top of that, he's also just not the biggest guy in the world. I mean, he's going to need more time in the program to be able to build up his muscle, and he's done that. So we'll see what happens. I still think there's a little bit of buzz for Devin Brown, but I kind of expect 2 weeks into the fall camp, you'll hear Will Howard get the starting role. I don't think it'll be like last year where Ryan Day takes it into the season and says, yeah, let's go 2 games and then figure it out. I think he wants to nail this down, and I think Will Howard's going to get the job.
Whichever quarterback gets named the starter here is going to be put in one of the most optimal situations in all of college football, especially with that running back room and those wide receivers. Tell me a little bit about the offense next year for the Buckeyes. Is it going to be, same high-powered, high-scoring that we've gotten used to?
Should be. Wide receiver is, young, but, Ohio State is one of the best teams at recruiting wide receivers in the country. Jeremiah Smith was a huge recruit last year, and there's high expectations for him. They're talking about he could get some serious snaps this coming year. Emeka Egbuka was a first-round projected draft pick after a sophomore season. Struggled with injuries last year, so he wasn't quite as dominant, but the skill set is definitely there. You can tell he hasn't lost a step. So he's definitely motivated to come back this year, prove that he's a first-round draft pick. And then Carnell Tate, he was another highly rated recruit who did good things last year, but, I mean, when you're in a receiving core with, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka and all these other guys, like, it's just hard to get playing time as a true freshman. So he got some playing time, but really going to be relying on him a lot this year. The offensive line returns five starters in college football, 4 from last year's offensive line. The center from last year is getting replaced by Seth McLaughlin, who was the center from Alabama. Don't listen to what people say about how Seth McLaughlin is bad. All right. Seth McLaughlin won an SEC championship. And yes, he did struggle with snapping last year, but you have a brand new quarterback and you struggle with snapping. I think anybody who has played football, who has played offensive line, who snapped the ball before will tell you sometimes it's just different with different quarterbacks. And I'm not blaming Jalen Milroe saying that it was his fault, but sometimes things are just different and you struggle in a different way. And everything coming out of spring practice was that Seth McLaughlin is having good chemistry with the quarterbacks at Ohio State, snapping the ball very well. And so they anticipate that, maybe he won't be an All-American or something like that, but he's going to be a very solid center for Ohio State. Really, it's that right guard position that is kind of up for grabs right now. There's 3 different guys that are kind of in on it. One of them, including being the center last year, Carson Hinsman. That's who I think is probably going to get the job, but we'll see. Offensive line bringing back plenty of starters is always good news, but we'll see if they develop. That's the big thing.
All right, and up next, we're going to talk defense and what the expectations for the Buckeyes are next season. Ohio State has always had a potent offense, and for a couple of years they were kind of lacking on the defensive side until they brought in the new defensive coordinator. And we talked about NIL earlier, and one of the biggest splashes, if not the biggest splash of this offseason, was Ohio State bringing in Caleb Downs, as you kind of mentioned earlier. JR, you've got to be a really talented guy to start every single game for a Nick Saban Alabama team and lead the team in tackling. What are your thoughts on getting Caleb Downs to Columbus?
Yeah, as a true freshman too, and if you believe the rumors, Caleb Downs might show up on the offensive side of the ball too. They're talking about him getting some running back reps. I don't know if I want to see that, just because I'm like, dude, don't get hurt, okay? Yeah. We need you at safety. But yeah, definitely. He's going to be a game changer for this offense. Now, he is switching roles. He is going from playing strong safety at Alabama to playing free safety at Ohio State. But everything you hear about this guy, there have been players. Players do a ton of interviews in the offseason and stuff, and there have been not just one but multiple players now say that they call Caleb Downs the co-defensive coordinator, because that's how locked in he is with the defense. That's how much he studies. That's how much film review he does. And so at the end of the day, maybe Caleb Downs might struggle a little bit going from one safety spot to another, but he's going to know the defense inside and out. He's going to always know his responsibility. There's been talk about, he might have the helmet communication in his head, which would be kind of weird for a safety. You would think a linebacker, but with Jim Knowles having that very safety-driven defense, it's not out of the question. We'll see what happens. Obviously, that's going to be some drama for Ohio State, who gets that helmet communication. And then, I think all this helmet comm stuff is going to be fun to see how people react to it. Can't steal signs anymore. All right, Team Up North. But yeah, it should be interesting. Very, very excited to see Caleb Downs in the scarlet and gray.
Tell us some other names to look out for.
Yeah, so the duo of corners, Denzel Burke, he's a top 3, top 5 cornerback, depending on who you ask out there in the nation, not just the Big Ten. Davidson Igbinosun, he started as a freshman at Ole Miss, came in as a sophomore last year at Ohio State, and he doesn't quite get the love that some other guys do, but boy is he nasty. He's one of those guys that trash talks, gets in your face, and he treats you bad on the field if you're on the other team. Now if you're on his team, you love having him, but he's kind of a nasty guy to play against, and so he's really brought that nasty attitude to the Ohio State secondary. So you're starting to see more of that. Lathan Ransom is coming back. There's some people out there that really, really are down on Lathan Ransom. Not so much with Ohio State fans, kind of outside the Ohio State fans. I suppose I get it, but before he got injured last year, he did not allow a single touchdown pass. He allowed, I think, a passer rating of 19 when balls were thrown toward the guys he was covering. So, if you go look up his PFF stuff, he was outstanding last year. Now, people can argue about if PFF is legitimate, those different kinds of things, but at least in the secondary, this is going to be a good secondary, one of the best in the nation. Jordan Hancock is playing the nickel role for him, and he does an excellent job there. Underrated blitzer. for what they can do, but just going to be really exciting to see what Ohio State secondary can do this year.
It's funny to think about because, as I mentioned before, Ohio State struggled in years past because of their defense, and Ryan Day kind of went all in hiring Jim Knowles. And now you have arguably one of the most talked about defenses in the country. What has Knowles changed on the defensive side of Buckeye football for it to reach the levels that it's reaching?
Well, when he first came in, he was very aggressive and really wanted to use the players' athleticism against the other team, and that was successful against the I shouldn't say the very unathletic team, the teams that couldn't match Ohio State's athleticism as well. And so that was very effective for them. But then you went up against teams like Georgia and teams like Michigan that had more athletic players and were better coached than some other teams, and Ohio State struggled in those areas because they were too aggressive and almost got a little bit, trying to think of the word, not dependable, but they could kind of see what was coming a little bit. They didn't switch things up a ton. And so at the end of the day, that made it hard as well. But what you saw this last year was just how disciplined everybody was and how conservative Jim Knowles was, which he got a little bit of flack for. But I mean, it was a top 3 defense in the nation last year. You can't give too much flack to the defensive coordinator, but we'll see what happens this year. I expect to see some more blitzing. I expect to see some more disciplined guys. I mean, really the only position that doesn't have starters coming back. You have one guy on the defensive line who left for the NFL, but of course he was kind of a pass rush specialist, so he wasn't an every down defensive lineman. And then your 2 linebackers have left. Sunny, I'll be honest, the 2 guys that are coming in to replace the linebackers, they could be better than the linebackers who left before. One was a 5th-round pick, one wasn't drafted, and they're talking about the 3 guys that are battling for the starting spots on Ohio State. All could be high draft picks. One of them may be a low draft pick, but all 3 of them are projected to be draft picks next year, which would be exciting for Ohio State fans.
So I've noticed, every time you talk about a guy going out, you seem to be higher on the guys coming in to replace them. So, let's kind of just talk about expectations real quick. Is there any way to describe a successful season for Ohio State outside winning a national championship?
Well, it starts with beating the team up north, right? You have to do that. That's first and foremost the goal, and then win the Big Ten. And for as long as it's been with, the team up north beating Ohio State hasn't won the Big Ten since 2020, and that's a little unheard of. That now, of course, it's weird because Michigan was the team that was going every year because they were going to the Big Ten championship game, and Ohio State would have played in the Big Ten championship game if it wasn't for the way the conference is lined up. But I mean, 3 years without going to the Big Ten championship game, without winning the conference, Ryan Day has that monkey. He needs to get off his back as well. I mean, the expectation is definitely national championship, but I mean, if you lose to, say, a Georgia or a Texas or somebody like that, another juggernaut out there, I'm not saying Ohio State fans are going to be happy, but I think they'll get it. It's not, like I said, it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be something that fans are going to enjoy, but the most important thing is beat the rival and win the Big Ten. And if you at least don't get blown out 31-0 like Urban Meyer did against Clemson in the playoffs, I think Ohio State will be feeling pretty good about what happened this season.
Well, then let me ask you, how would you feel if Ohio State is the national champions of the 2024-2025 season, but you lost a 4th straight game to the Michigan Wolverines? How would you describe the overall feeling on that scenario?
Yeah, that question actually gets debated amongst Ohio State fans a lot.
Crazy.
And every Ohio State fan you ask has a different opinion. For me, I'd be happy with it. I'm not saying that it wouldn't feel like something wasn't missing. I heard somebody on a podcast say, and this is probably the best way I could describe it to somebody else. You get married and that's a great day. You accomplished it. You got married. But say your mom couldn't be there. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, you got married and it's awesome, but something's missing. Your mom wasn't there. It's like, okay, we won the national championship. That's awesome. Nobody's going to complain about winning the national championship, but you lost against your rival. And it's like something's missing. Something wasn't completely there. And as weird as it sounds for Ohio State fans, that's kind of the way it is. And honestly, I think it'd probably be the same for Michigan fans. If they were being honest, I think it'd probably be the same for them too if that happened. Not saying this year. They're not going to win the national championship this year.
Let's talk about another team that actually might win the national championship and probably the only team that's had, toe-to-toe as good of an offseason as Ohio State has. And I'm talking about Oregon, the new team coming from out west. I think they've got like the number one recruiting class coming in next year. And when we talk about Ohio State NIL, Oregon is on a different level from even that. And obviously you two have a matchup. I believe it's at Oregon this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, October 12th.
What are your thoughts on, like, have you guys started scouting them yet? Because I really feel like that could be another future budding rivalry, just the way how aggressive both fan bases and both, when it comes to NIL and success on the field and off the field. I think that could be the Big Ten's next big rivalry. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think you could definitely turn into that. It's interesting because I like Oregon fans quite a bit. I find some similarities with them. Yeah, for now, I guess. But I find a lot of similarities with them. We both have the O. We're both the Southern school, and the rivalry with the other team. We both are, I think, are the better team, but we don't lead in the rivalry all the time. And so at the end of the day, like, it's kind of weird. But I feel confident that if Ohio State lost to Oregon, but they won the national championship, there wouldn't be that like feeling of something missing like there would be with Michigan. Obviously, you want to win. I think that would probably more get in the way with like winning the Big Ten championship or something like that. One of the reasons why you kind of have a little bit of forgiveness there is because it is at Oregon, and I think we're going to see a lot of teams traveling to the West Coast losing this season. I would not be surprised if the West Coast teams have like a 90% winning percentage at home, 95% winning percentage at home or something like that, just because of how crazy the travel is going to be. And so I do think there's going to be a little bit of forgiveness there, and that's another reason why the Ohio State-Michigan game is so, such a big thing, is because it is in Columbus. And so, you lose at home, it's like, that's even worse. But yeah, I think if Ohio State fans were to lose to Oregon in the regular season, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Now, if they lose to them in the playoffs after beating them twice or after losing to them twice in the season, we're talking about a different story there. There would be some very upset fans if that happened.
JR, thank you so much for coming on. Can you let the audience know one more time where they can find your work?
Yeah, Voice of College Football, Ohio State. Go check me out. That's all of the Ohio State content. I do videos. Mark Rogers does a live stream every Wednesday with some Ohio State guys, but you'll find me doing videos, if not every day, at least every other day. And then College Huddle, we do the Big Ten Huddle over there. Me and Zach Guggenheim, we do a football show. And then on Wednesday, me and Kent, Casual Big Ten, we do a basketball show. Yeah, so football at 9 a.m. Eastern time, or 9 p.m. Eastern time, football on Tuesdays. 9 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays is basketball. And we talk a lot of Illinois on the basketball show because there's a lot of Illinois fans that like basketball.
I talk about that all the time on this show. Illinois, is, in particular basketball, obviously, really brings those clicks and those views. And even over the last couple of days, you see some of the same characters trying to troll Illini fans. And
I've been a defender of Brad Underwood to the Purdue fans in the chat, and I don't know if the Purdue fans always appreciate it, but yeah, that's kind of become my role on the show. I defended Brad Underwood more than I ever thought I would.
Well, we're in solidarity on that part, Jared. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, Sunny. I appreciate you having me.
Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And that'll just about wrap it up for this edition of Locked On Illini. Please, on your way out, if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow, and it costs you absolutely nothing. It is Big Ten Media Week. I should be in Indianapolis, so if there's any particular questions you wanted me to ask any of the coaches in the Big Ten Conference, leave it in the chat. I'll do my best whenever I get some alone time with those guys. Tomorrow's episode, again, it's one that I'm very excited about. So make sure you hit that notification button at the top of the screen so you'll know exactly when that one's going to be released. And until then, ILL. Love you guys.